Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a big one, something anyone serious about fitness has probably thought about. Is animal protein really king for building muscle?
Yeah, it's a belief that's been around for a long time, the sort of standard thinking.
But we've got some fascinating new research that might just, well, challenge that whole idea.
Exactly. A study out of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is taking a fresh look. It really goes head-on against some long-held assumptions.
So this research, it dug into some key questions, didn't it? Like, does the source matter, plant versus animal, when you're lifting weights?
Right. And also, is spreading your protein out evenly through the day actually that critical?
And crucially, does all this change if you're just eating a, sufficient amount of protein, not necessarily megadoses?
And the answers they found were, well, pretty surprising. Basically, no to all three.
Wow. Okay. That definitely makes you stop and think. It was led by Professor Nicholas Bird and Andrew Asko.
That's right, published in Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise. Bird even called the old idea the current dogma.
Okay. Dogma. Strong word. But it came from somewhere, right? There's research suggesting animal protein was better.
Oh, absolutely. Earlier studies often focus on the short term, what happens right after a single meal.
Ah, okay.
And those studies did often show a bigger spike in muscle protein synthesis. That's the muscle building process after an animal protein meal compared to, say, a vegan one.
So you eat a steak, your muscles respond more acutely than if you eat, like, lentils right after a workout in the short term.
Kind of the idea, yeah. And Professor Bird mentioned that even their initial hypothesis was that the animal protein group would likely do better in this new study, too.
But he also pointed out a problem with only looking at that short-term response, didn't he? Like, one meal isn't the whole story.
Exactly. It's like judging a marathon runner based on their first 100 meters. What happens over days, weeks with a consistent diet, that might be different.
Right. A snapshot versus the whole movie.
Precisely. And he actually referenced a previous longer study, 10 weeks, I think, comparing vegans and omnivores doing weight training.
And what did that one find?
Interestingly, over that longer time frame, they didn't see significant differences in muscle protein synthesis between the groups.
So conflicting evidence already existed then. But there were some, let's say, caveats with that older 10-week study, things this new research wanted to address.
Yes, a couple of important points. First, the protein intake in that study was pretty high, like 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Which is quite a bit, yeah.
Bird argues that's probably more than you actually need to max out muscle growth from training.
Okay.
And second, the vegans in that earlier trial got a lot of their protein from supplements, not really reflective of a typical whole food vegan diet.
Gotcha. So this new study aimed to be more, well, realistic, looking at whole foods, a more moderate protein level, and different eating patterns.
Exactly. They wanted to see what happens with habitual eating, using varied whole food diets, either vegan or meat-based over time, and test that protein timing question too.
So how did they set it up? Who was involved?
They recruited 40 healthy, active adults, aged between 20 and 40.
And started everyone off the same way?
Yeah, with a 7-day habituation diet, basically to get everyone to a similar nutritional starting line before the real test began. Standardized things.
Smart. So minimizing background noise, nutritionally speaking, then they split them up.
Right. Randomly assigned to either a vegan diet or an omnivorous diet. And this is key. The research team provided all the meals.
Wow, that's tight control. Some eaten in the lab, some at home.
Yep. Ensures compliance. The omnivore diet got about 70% of its protein from animal sources: beef, chicken, dairy, eggs, the usual suspects.
And the vegan diet, they made sure it was nutritionally sound.
Absolutely. Carefully balanced with various plant sources to provide all the essential amino acids. So a complete protein intake just from plants.
Okay, so two main diet groups, but then they layered on the timing aspect.
Exactly. Within both the vegan and omnivore groups, they split them again. Half ate protein pretty evenly across 3 meals.
And the other half?
They had 5 meals, with the protein intake kind of skewed, more of it consumed later in the day, so they could directly compare even versus varied distribution.
And everyone was lifting weights regularly?
Yep, supervised resistance training in the lab every 3 days. Plus, they wore accelerometers, like fitness trackers, to monitor their general activity outside the lab.
Okay, keeping the exercise variable consistent. Now, tell us about the heavy water. That sounds pretty cool. How did that work?
It is cool. Basically, participants drank water labeled with deuterium. It's a safe, stable type of hydrogen, like a tiny tag.
A tag,
Yeah. When your body uses amino acids from the protein you eat to build new muscle, these deuterium tags get incorporated into that new muscle tissue.
Ah, so you can trace where the building blocks are going.
Precisely. By analyzing muscle samples later, they can see exactly how much new muscle protein has been synthesized using the protein consumed during the study. It's a very direct measure.
Like tracking marked bricks going into a wall.
That's a great analogy.
And to get those measurements, they needed muscle samples, biopsies.
Correct. Small biopsies from a leg muscle at the start and end of the 9-day trial period. This allowed them to quantify the rate of muscle protein synthesis.
Okay, so rigorous setup, detailed measurements. What did they actually find? This is the exciting part.
It really is. The headline finding, and Bird himself said it was initially surprising, was no significant difference in muscle protein synthesis rates between the vegan group and the omnivore group.
No difference, despite the dogma.
No statistically significant difference. It suggests that when protein intake is sufficient and comes from varied whole foods, the source plant or animal might not matter for muscle building over that period.
That is a big deal. So, for you listening, maybe stressing about needing meat or whey isn't necessary if your plant-based diet is well planned.
That seems to be the implication, if the diet provides enough high-quality protein overall.
Okay, finding number 1, source might not matter. What about finding number 2, the timing, evenly spread versus varied intake?
Also surprising. They found that protein distribution, 3 even meals versus 5 varied meals, had no effect on muscle building in either diet group.
Really?
Yeah.
So all that advice about perfectly spacing protein every few hours, maybe less critical.
Within the context of this study, with sufficient overall protein, it didn't seem to make a difference. Bird noted this was unexpected too, given some acute studies suggesting timing matters more.
So maybe gives you a bit more flexibility in how you structure your meals day to day.
Potentially, yes, as long as the total daily intake is adequate.
And speaking of adequate, remind us about the protein level they tested. It was moderate, right?
Yeah, around 1.1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day.
Why that specific level?
Bird explained it's in line with what his lab previously found is enough to maximize muscle protein synthesis with training. And importantly, it's closer to what a typical American diet might actually contain.
So more relatable than, say, bodybuilder levels of 2 grams per kilo or more.
Exactly. Makes the findings perhaps more broadly applicable.
Given all this, what's Bird's takeaway advice now? Best food for muscle after a workout.
It's refreshingly simple. He basically said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, the best kind is the kind you actually eat. As long as you get enough high-quality protein from your food, the source seems less important.
The kind you put in your mouth. I like that. Focus on sufficiency and quality from varied sources.
It pretty much sums it up.
Now, we should always mention funding. Where did the support for this study come from?
Yes, it's noted that the study received funding from the Beef Checkoff program, which is overseen by the National Cattlemen's Beef Board.
Good to know. Okay, so wrapping this up for everyone listening, the big takeaway seems to be
that when protein intake is sufficient, say around that 1.1, 1.2 GKL mark, and comes from varied whole food sources, whether it's plant-based or animal-based, doesn't seem to significantly change muscle-building outcomes with resistance training, at least over this study's time frame.
And the timing throughout the day. Also less critical than maybe we thought.
Apparently so, according to these findings. Even distribution versus varied didn't show a difference here.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, if this long-held idea about animal protein superiority is being challenged.
What other nutritional certainties might be worth re-examining? It's a great question.
Maybe this gives you, the listener, permission to simplify things a bit. Focus on hitting your overall protein goal with quality foods you enjoy, rather than getting bogged down in specific sources or super strict timing.
It certainly points in that direction. It could open up more sustainable and varied dietary approaches for fitness goals. Definitely something to think about. What other assumptions guide your choices, and are they supported by the latest science? Food for thought, you could say.